Okay. Thanks and welcome to another episode of the Environmental Answers podcast, EnvAns for short. Today we are lucky to be joined by Perri Kramer, who's really going to introduce us to food systems, health, and climate. How's it going, Perri?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Thanks for coming on today. We really want to get to know you and what you're working on. So could you kick us off first with telling us like who you are and what are you working on?
Yes, I'm happy to. Again, my name is Perri Kramer. I work the intersection of food systems, health, and climate. I have had a lifelong commitment to food systems like my entire life. I grew up just like in a family that was super into food in a very deep and cultural way, and just like all of our celebrations and everything we did really revolved around food. It was just an amazing way to grow up. And then, but in growing up that way, um, wasn't connected to my food system. Like I lived in the suburbs of like a big metropolitan area in Chicago. Like I went to grocery stores that had like ton of ultra processed foods, and I like never saw a farmer's market until I was like like 12 or something. I'd never been to a farm until I was like 12 or 13. And so something like clicked for me when I was super young, and I just felt super connected to where my food was coming from and wanted to know everything about it. And I have spent the last like 20 plus years, or like 25 years since I was like 15, kind of just exploring every single part of the food system. So I started out working in farms in my teens. I worked in different like nonprofit urban food environments like during high school and college. I worked at cattle ranches and like vegetable farms in college as well. And then after college, I worked for farmers markets, and then spent over 8 years at Whole Foods working as a marketer and store team leader, because I was like, my favorite thing in the world is like selling this food. I want to like make it so beautiful. I like truly believe in providing access to like delicious, high quality food. So I worked at Whole Foods. Then I worked for a restaurant company and then a school lunch company. Then I worked for an entrepreneurial, like startup food-based accelerator that like supported nonprofit, that supported food system folks from across the spectrum. And now I work for a large hunger relief organization supporting nutritious foods in the food supply. And I just like have spent my like entire adult life really like obsessed with like all the different parts of how our food system works and how to get people access to the most high quality, the most local, the most like best produced, like most ethically produced and sustainably produced food possible. So that's like a little bit of who I am, and like all of the different places that I've gotten to work and see in the food system.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that. I would say, like, I kind of skipped the part about this is the advanced podcast, and we're here to bring you what's what in the environmental industry and what's working. And I feel like a lot of what you were saying, I was just like, there's so many things that you worked on. So you might be able to really, or you will be able to for sure, bring us some insights on what is working in these food systems. Just to note, the previous episode that we had, which was episode 118 or 117, focused on specifically harvesting through cultural memory. So we focused on like the farmers market and understanding that. In this episode, we're actually diving more into like food systems. I'd like to think about what we title it is food as medicine, and really how that starts with where is the food coming from, how it's moving through the cycles to get to us. Something that you also just shared, Perri, that I could totally relate to is like not knowing at the very beginning, where's my food coming from? You know, I remember like going to like the fast food restaurants and they were giving me food, or going with my mom and dad to like the grocery store. But like there is a whole step before that. So
Yeah.
could you talk to us a little bit more about like what that looks like and maybe even why we may not have been exposed to it earlier in life?
Yeah, I love that question. And so I had the same feeling, like where does my food come from, and like what are all the steps that it takes to get to me? And what I started kind of investigating as like my lifelong career is like okay, the food begins on a farm, but sometimes it begins even before then. Like farmers buy seeds, and where are those seeds coming from?
Mm.
Where in before like large like agricultural like corporations existed, people would just save seeds. Like it's amazing, and they would share them. If you had a squash and you grew a squash, the squash has 100 seeds in it. You would just save those seeds and give them to all like your friends, and they would travel throughout the world. And that's how like seeds traveled like from one continent to another. It's like so amazing to even just think about how seeds can travel from place to place. Like, for example, I think tomatoes are indigenous to the Americas, and they didn't even come to Italy until like the 1600s or 1700s. And now we think of tomatoes as like the thing of Italy, like tomato sauce, but it's actually indigenous to the Americas. So that is just like one example to me of like, there's so much rich history in every single part of our food chain. And so like what the food system looks like is like it starts on the farm, and then and then farmers can sell in a variety of marketplaces. Sometimes they sell directly to consumers, like in a consumer supported agriculture model, or they can sell to a food hub, which like collects food in a group and then sells to a retailer, or they can go to other type of hubs or conglomerate or like commodity groups that collect lots of different types of food and then sell them to retailers who might be folks like Whole Foods or Safeway or Jewel, or like a local corner store, or it might be like institutional food. Like they might be selling to someone like Aramark, who's like an institutional, works in like hospitals and college campuses and schools, and then the food is getting distributed through those kind of like institutional places. So there's so many ways that we interact with our food. But I think the one of the big transitions that happened over the last 70 years is that something, I don't know the exact stat, but a significant portion of Americans were involved in growing food like 100 years ago. Like you would know the people who grew your food. But then after World War II, the like corporate kind of like commoditization of or corporatization of like the food system really began in earnest, and people became more and more separated from their food source. The introduction of plastic had a huge influence on this. Like people used to receive milk like in a glass jug,
Yeah.
and now we receive milk in like plastic containers or paper containers. But be, but because of like the in you know the packaging advances, I put that in quotes because like they've actually been like pretty destructive to our like to our environmental systems. But because of these packaging advances, like we've been able to put foods on shelves for much longer, and we don't really have to like engage in relationships with our food system the way that we used to. So now I think something like 2% of Americans are working on farms. A lot of it's done by like machinery, different technological advances. But for the most part, we're pretty removed from our food system, and it takes a lot of personal effort to be connected to it. It doesn't just happen. Like you have to seek it out. Like people have to go to farmers markets. People have to like try to go to farms. Like in most folks' everyday experiences, they're not aware of where their food comes from, and the companies who control the food system are not making it easy for people to see where their food comes from. So
I took a sip of water at the wrong
yeah.
No, that was like one you answered the what about food systems and the how a bit, and I really appreciate you giving the full like perspective, because like I was saying, like as a young person, you may not know where your food is coming from. Some of it could be by design, but other of it is just like evolving over time. Something that we have as a philosophy here at the Environmental Answers podcast is more so like, yeah, progress does not look like perfection. And we may have made some mistakes with like packaging, but we are now progressing past that. That's the goal and that's the view. And so like people got to spend less time in the or like in the farm fields, or like so that they could have other ways of advancing us as people. And so like that's like one of those things you look at and you're like, okay, great, we did that. But you know, there is a disconnect with us like in our food. And I guess I did kind of answer a part of the why, but why else do you think that that is part of it? Is it the time thing? Is it the evolution of different things? I know you mentioned you got the opportunity to work in some of the accelerators for like maybe startups and stuff. So I wonder like how they thought to go back to that. Is that true?
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think a lot of the, I would say, like rationale with how the food system, I would say a lot of the reasoning that people use for how the food system has changed in the last like 70 years or so is that it's allowed like women in particular to have more time not in the kitchen. Like cooking takes a lot of time. Like I know it from my own like home garden, and then like prepping all the food from that garden and then like cooking it for my family. It's an enormous undertaking. And so I think there's a lot of really important reasons why we have food that's easier to cook, quicker to cook, and like doesn't take as much time. And yet, I do think there's like a somewhat universal recognition that food has a lot of cultural meaning and like value of connecting us to each other. Like when we sit around a table with people and we like are enjoying a beautiful meal, like cooked at home, like that someone like put their heart and soul into, that's like a really meaningful experience. Like the smells, the taste, the memories of that conversation like stick with people forever. And so I think that because of this recognition that like we simultaneously want more time to like get everything done in our already busy lives, we also want to feel connection and feel like meaning, and that food is a really great avenue to do that. I feel like there's got to be like a happy medium, and I think that's what a lot of the really interesting like innovations that are happening now are doing. They're like finding that middle ground. They're saying like you don't have to like go back to like the complete like growing your own food and then prepping it and then preparing it situation, but you'd also don't have to eat highly processed foods. Like there's a way for you to like have the best of both worlds. And something that like there's a lot of really interesting co-op grocery stores all across the country that I'm really intrigued by right now, because a lot of them are making and I'll just talk about this one example now, and then we can get into more later. But a lot of them are making like incredibly high quality home cooked meals that folks can like pick up and then eat at home. So there's this one small grocery store in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, that's like an hour north of Milwaukee, that I went to last year and was like totally blown away by. And it's this like very small town. It has like a history of like industry, like kind of like a union town where they're like building like parts and machines and things like that. And it has this co-op grocery store, which they're basically sourcing a lot of different like high quality produce and meats from the like regional Wisconsin area. And then they're making really delicious food that they're selling at pretty reasonable prices, honestly, like to their local community. And this food is delicious, like so good, like the most delicious lasagnas, like these salads that are like so interesting and like fresh, like tiramisu that I like would drive 2 hours for. It was like just unbelievable. And I just felt like this like to me, this is like this is like the perfection of like a happy medium.
Mm.
Like I'm not having to cook all of my own food, and I'm not having to go to a restaurant and pay like super exorbitant prices. But this grocery store is like is cooking food like at scale. Like they're making 30 tiramisus a day. They're making like 60 lasagnas and like 100 salads a day, so that their costs are not their costs are pretty good for a consumer. And then I can get this high quality food, and they've integrated this philosophy in of local sourcing, like in their practices. So I just think that's like one example of something that doesn't actually feel that innovative. It's not like a cool technology. It's not like it's not like so exciting per se, but when you experience it, you realize that these basic practices of like regional and local sourcing paired with like high quality culinary skills paired with like affordable access for consumers is like, to me, kind of like a holy trinity of like best in class food access. And that's one of the things that I would like just love to see everywhere. Like if like I live in north of Chicago, and there's not a grocery store near me in Chicago that has a model that's this well done. And I'm just like, there should be one in Chicago. There should be 10 in Chicago. And so I think one of the hopes that I have for like the way that food systems get built like across the country is like that we have more of these kind of like easily accessible retail outlets where you can get high quality food in like a retail grocery setting. And I do actually think co-op grocery stores might be an answer to that. So
no, that was really clear. I was gonna say like you brought up co-op a couple times, and I just for those that are listening, they may not know the difference between what's a co-op versus I guess a traditional grocery store. Could you describe that for us a little bit? Just because like one, I learned so much from what you described, and I was thinking like, I wonder if someone might say like, well, what's the difference between a co-op and a regular grocery store?
yeah. So co-op grocery stores are basically like primarily community owned, and they're not focused on maximizing profit. So, you know, we live in a society that's like that the financial system is like based on capitalism, and there's a lot of good things about capitalism, but there are but in the grocery retail model, for the most part, it's like maximized for profits. Like, so anything that seems inefficient, you want to like maximize those profits. So for example, when I started working at Whole Foods like 20 years ago, we were making all of the food in-house at our prepared foods counter. Over the last like 20 years, that has progressively changed to having the food prepared in like kitchens, like outside of the stores, and then shipped like to all of the store locations like in that region, or even nationally. So like for example, where we would once make chana masala or like stuffing at a store level, now those are made at like a regional center and then shipped out. But what you lose is and so it's more efficient cost wise because they can like centralize all of the food preparation and like concentrate labor, and also like they don't have to train as many people on all of the different recipes. They just train a few folks. So it's much more efficient cost wise, but you lose taste and quality and freshness because it's not being made on site. And you also lose the creativity that different like culinary folks at stores have. Like we used to have people who like went to culinary school, like working at all the stores. Like they were like literally graduated from culinary school and then would be like working in the kitchens at Whole Foods. Like that's awesome. And I'm not sure if that's happening now. Like you'd have to ask. the people of Whole Foods.
Whole Foods and But yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And that's also you answered a question for me. Like on a side note, I'm like, man, the food doesn't taste the same at Whole Foods. Ding
It
ding ding.
doesn't.
Like it doesn't. It doesn't. I
Yeah.
remember like a while ago, Whole Foods had a whole different experience, especially the hot food bar. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, that diversity in like a food choice and flavor profile can get lost.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of boring now.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like so sad. Like like it used to be kind of even working there. I worked at a store for 8 years, like 4 different stores over 8 years, but like people would surprise me. Like the culinary team, they'd put something out and I think like, wow, that's good. Like we should have that on rotation. That does not happen now. It's like the same stuff all the time. Like whenever I go to my local Whole Foods, I'm like, ugh, this again.
Missing the good old days of having like and that's something that's interesting that you brought up as far as like how and where people find profit, when it comes to like business models, especially those centered around like food systems to help us to be more efficient. Like it saves time, it like reduces waste, but you do end up being even more, it sounds like, disconnected from the food. As a follow-up question, kind of leaning back into the title of this episode, food as medicine, I guess the question that is, what does that look like now that like we're disconnected? Like I know for me and my own personal interest, I have been looking at like herbs and understanding which ones could be used for different things. And I was just wondering what thoughts you had around like food as medicine.
Yeah. So thank you. That's a great question. So food as medicine is a phrase that has like deep cultural resonance like across so many different cultures. I think it's like also kind of like universal truth that like so many indigenous cultures in all different parts of the world have used food and herbs as like ways of healing and like supporting health. And so like that's a universally like kind of understood concept. Right now, there is a movement to try to figure out how to incorporate healthy eating behaviors into like clinical or like the health into clinical practices or like into the healthcare sector, because over the last like 70 years or so in America, we've seen like health be a very challenging health be very challenging, and it's primarily it's health be very challenging and it's a result of the a lot of the highly processed foods and like poor diet quality that's in the overall American diet. It's called like the standard American diet, or like SAD for like, acronym is short. And it's just like too high fat, too high, like generally too high in like animal proteins, too many sugars, like too many carbs, and not enough vegetables. Something like 1 in 20 Americans like gets the recommended amount of vegetables every day or something. So we basically need to like increase the amount of vegetables, increase the amount of like healthy fats, like nuts and seeds and avocados and like fish and chicken, and like just less less carbohydrates, which are like prevalent throughout like so much of the American diet. So the food as medicine work that's like happening with healthcare is a very specific intervention where individuals that have like chronic disease like hypertension or diabetes, or like high blood pressure, could be prescribed like a food prescription, like a healthy food prescription, like a medically tailored meal, or which is like a healthy meal that's like designed for someone who has a certain like chronic disease state. And they would get those foods either delivered to them or they could pick them up. And it's essentially to help support people as they try to improve their health. It's helped support them with healthy food so that they ultimately like have long-term behavior change and like start to eat healthier foods long-term. So that's a little bit about like this very specific intervention that's happening around food as medicine. But overall, and that I would say there's a lot of it's like a growing sector. It has like a lot of investment behind it. But overall, the idea of food as medicine generally is that we have a lot of options in front of us in terms of like what we eat. And food is, we need to be thoughtful about like what we put into our body, just like we're thoughtful about like the medicine we take. And the food that we put into our body like has an impact on our overall health. Some people refer to as food as health instead of food as medicine, because we can like support our long-term health like by being able to choose like the most nutrient dense foods that are available to us. Now the rub here, and what I like actually wrote my master's project on at the program we went to together, is that the food environment is pretty like inequitable in terms of like access to like high quality nutrient dense foods. So there's a lot of food environments that have like primarily like fast food or corner stores. They don't have high quality fruits and vegetables. If they do have fruits and vegetables, they're like maybe browning or like turning bad. So there is a real challenge that we have like as a society on like how do we provide all communities across the country with more access to healthy foods. And so that is one of I think the biggest challenges that we have, because we can prescribe healthy foods and meals to people all we want, but at the end of the day, that prescription will end. And so where are they going to continue to get that healthy food from? And so one of the organizations that's doing an amazing job at like trying to change the food environment for the better is the Center for Good Food Purchasing. They're like a really cool organization that basically has developed this framework for how to integrate regional and local sourcing practices based on like equity and sustainability into institutional sourcing and other types of like retail sourcing. And they've been working closely with different like city and state governments in different places. And I just think their work is really remarkable, because they've essentially created a framework that different retailers and institutions like hospitals or school systems can adopt to try to improve the quality of their food. And that, I think, is one of the best ways forward to incrementally impact and improve our food system.
No, that was really one. I learned a little bit more about your master's project and like how it connected to the big picture. Because one, I really appreciated it. Something that came to mind when I was listening to you just now was the fact that there's some areas. I live in Raleigh, and the city is developing actually at like a very rapid scale. I was born here. I'm technically like 8th generation North Carolinian, so a lot of times when I talk to people, I'm like, yeah, this is not the Raleigh I grew up in. I came here every summer of my life, and it looked completely different every summer of my life. But point that I was trying to get at is there's this one area along a way to get in and out of the city, and they're putting gas station after gas station, but that whole area, I would use the term, is a food desert except for a Sam's Club. Like there's a Sam's Club and gas stations. So like I wonder, like the people down that corridor that live behind, I'm like, where are they getting their groceries? Like there is one specialty store, but that store, may not be the right pricing and it fits one specific demographic. But like just understanding, and we used to have a grocery store that I felt like was really something that served the aging population in that area, and they took it out. And now it's like a kids zone place. So like seeing economic development as a fundamental, like what is it connected to? Is like as we develop spaces economically, how can we better incorporate maybe like the solution that you provided or that source where we can put better groceries or spaces that people can get food within the system. So
yeah, and I think that, to me, it's like that consumers have a lot of power, and also I think voters have a lot of power. Like I think about how one of the platforms that Mandami ran on was to have like community grocery stores that were like supported, that are supported by New York City. And I think that got a lot of traction because people have seen that large corporations will divest from their communities, will leave their communities, like for various reasons. Like the store you mentioned that like
Yeah.
left. Like we can't, like I we can't count on the consumers have a lot of buying power to try to keep corporations like who have grocery stores in their communities if they're like making money. But also sometimes corporations make decisions for various reasons that we don't know about, and then food access is removed from a community, which has like a really detrimental impact on like the overall health of that community. And so then I think it's important to try to advocate for policies to anyone who's interested in it, like on either side of the political spectrum, to increase like healthy food access to communities. Be that, and it can come in so many different ways. It can come in the like in government, like offering like tax breaks or something to different like retailers who will like open stores in communities that don't have enough access to food. It could come in like supporting community gardens or like local like grants to local to like start a local grocery store, like corner shop. And I think that I I see that there is a that I see that there's a real, I would acknowledged, people are starting to acknowledge how valuable access to good food is in their lives. And I think that the more that everyday people are willing to just like stand up and stand up and like advocate for like healthy food access for be it in any way they can, I think the more power we will have as consumers. And we'll see how it all plays out. Like I do we'll see how it all plays out. I think that it's like not, yeah, I'll just stop there. I don't know.
No, I mean, what you're saying, you're showing us a pathway to progress that could work, right? And so I appreciate the picture that you painted of like opportunities both for the businesses, the government, individuals to vote with their dollars, communicate their need, and lean into, going forward. A lot of like what we try to focus on at the Environmental Answers podcast is just finding that pathway. Like, what is a way? And so we really appreciate you sharing and painting that picture because we all can be inspired by the thoughts that you're sharing. So, Perri, I really appreciate you breaking it down. It's amazing that 33 minutes has already gone
Oh
by
my gosh,
that
yes.
fast, but you have dropped so many gems, and we just want to say thank you for your leadership and work that you're doing because it's very critical for us to have a better shared future. Sometimes when people think about the environment, they only think about like one thing, but like environmental answers are everywhere in all areas of the work. So we really appreciate, you leaning in and breaking out like what it means to work in food systems, health, and how it's all connected. I know I learned a lot I didn't know people were getting scripts for diets. I think about like my own health and looking at A1Cs and understanding like all those things and like, getting a prescription for like, this is what you should eat, is very helpful. But how do people maintain that being a critical thing? In closing, I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience that maybe has come to mind while I was saying a few things? And I'll get back to my next question after that. So you have anything you want to say?
So many things, but
Yeah.
I would say that one of the things that my whole world is focused on food and like how food intersects with all the different parts of like our lives. And when I was in my grad school program, it was a program focused on environmental management, and all the different folks in the program were coming from different parts of the environmental field, like water, energy, or conservation, or policy. And I was, I think, like the only food person. And so I took it as like a challenge to think about how any single question that came about in the educational experience, how could I turn it into like a food question?
Mm-hmm.
And so, a question would come up on like a economics question, and I would think about it in a food lens. And the question would come up on like conservation, and I would think about pollinators and how it affects our food supply. And something that this whole experiment that I did in my educational experience showed me was that food is the connective tissue to like our entire lives. Like food is about individual health. Food is about like our environment and like the quality of like the land that is like around us, and how like food is about our water. Food is about like our food is about like so many things. It's in everything, and every single person eats, and like we all should care really deeply about our food system, and like how to make a food system that is like equitable, and that incorporates environmentally like safe practices, because we're all the end user. We're all the eaters at the end of the day. And so we need to like advocate and ensure and like fight for like good food practices and policies and sourcing and all the things, because at the end of the day, like we're the ones who are going to be eating that food, and we're the ones who are going to have to face the health effects of that food, like in the long term. So that's just a little bit of like what I've been thinking about.
No, I really,
like
really appreciate. No, and why it matters. No, that makes sense, and I appreciate you bringing it to our awareness, increasing our environmental intelligence. So, in closing, I did want to ask, how best can people keep up with you or stay in touch with you, especially because you have definitely opened up a world of questions for me. So.
Well, I am on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way. And you can also email me at perri.kramer@gmail.com. But yeah, I am not a frequent LinkedIn poster, but I sometimes share things that are...
No, that's great. That's good. So it's Perri, Perri, for those that are listening, Kramer, Kramer, and you can find her on LinkedIn, and she'll be able to answer some of your questions. Again, Perri, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for everyone who tuned into this episode of the Environmental Answers podcast, where we were able to dive in deeply around food as medicine, but also understanding our food systems and how we all share it. If you ever have any questions, you can email us at ask.envans.org or visit us at EnvAns.org. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Environmental Answers podcast. Until next time, stay well. Bye.